Hi friends, it's Sarah from Ruffles and Rainboots.com, and today I'm sharing 7 gnomes made with a single pattern. You can either hot glue this pattern or sew it, and these tutorials show you how to do both. If you want to sell, you only need 1 commercial license and you can make unlimited gnomes with this best-selling pattern on the internet. You can make it with legs and little booties, or you can make it without. You can make them as plain or as detailed as your imagination can give you. You can use add-ons like wings or booties, and you can even test new materials like using fur, wool locks, and even doll hair. Get the pattern down below and let's get started with the first gnome. These are all pre-recorded. Thanks for watching. Hi friends, it's Sarah from Ruffles and Rainboots.com, and today I'm going to make 2 no-sew reindeer gnomes. And hey, if you would like to make them with me, just boop and boop, stick around. As always, please give this video a like so I know you're here crafting with me. So I'm going to show you the front, back, sides, everything. One is going to have arms, one is going to have little reindeer feet, hooves, I don't know. The Scandinavian Sweeties pattern is what I'm using because so many readers told me that they were using it with hot glue. I have to try it. So I'm going to start out just by painting 2 1-inch wood rounds with a red ruby paint. It's just a chalk paint. Hitting them with a heat gun and then adding a little accent. On one of these I added 3 dots and one of them 1. Alright, so then I'm just using a glossy Mod Podge, hitting that with a heat gun, and I end up with these 2 ready to use noses. Easy peasy. Alright, next up we're going to use an X-Acto knife, a cutting mat, glue gun. We're going to have faux fur of some kind or yarn. If you're going to want to make a beard, I do suggest the faux fur. It just elevates it. So for the Scandinavian Sweeties pattern, I'm going to use the arms, the base, body, and hat. I'm also going to use the tie top mittens. For the feet, I'm going to use these little booties from the Dollar Tree. You can also use paper rolls and a stiff brown felt. I'm going to use a red velvet and these little gold balls from the bells from the Dollar Tree. I'm just going to be sewing a couple of them on there. And for the antlers, you can use any antlers you want. The Dollar Tree actually has some right now that you can go and get pre-made, but I used this little set as a template because I thought those antlers were adorable. They're all rounded off. So I just traced them, one facing one way, one the other, onto a piece of brown stiff felt with a white pen and cut them out. I made 2 sets of those. So for the arms, I thought it was going to be a little hard to turn it. I know other people have, but so I just put wrong sides together and it did it that way. For the body, I am using the right sides together method. So I'm going to use it, follow the pattern exactly for the base and the body. Base we're going to put off to the side after we complete the hat. I figured that way it would just be a little easier. Everything would be dry and secure. And for all of these, just make sure you're lining up the very edges. So I've made a few of these now, and I gotta tell you, the glue, I'm gonna show you exactly what it looks like, but the glue, I made the mistake twice in a row, and I just think, I don't know, I need some help from you all with the hot glue method, I think, but I'll show you all of that. For the base, I'm just lining it up and I am pinning it, so I'm going to secure it with glue in one spot and then pin all of the others until I can make sure that I have a nice, even base. So all I'm doing is lining it up, splitting the difference between the 2 pins, using my fingers to sort of smooth everything out, and then pinning it in place. So you can see I'm making sure those edges are right lined up. And then we'll be pulling it and tugging on it after we glue it to make sure it's secure. All right, so to secure it, I'm just going to use a fine tip glue gun and start working on this seam here. That's it. I am going to stay pretty close to the edge, and I'm going to try and make it the same distance from the edge. I'm not going to care if any hot glue seeps out because that's all going to be tucked in. So you can see right there, I'm not going to wipe that away. It's fine. It's going to add to the seal. I did take this a little slower than I normally would with hot glue stuff, just because I'm not going to put my weight in any kind of baggie or anything. So I want to make sure this is really solid and secure. I'm going to speed this part up because it's literally just doing the same thing over. But if you have any questions on this, let me know. Or you can join the Facebook group. We're a really helpful bunch of crafters. So if you're either new to making gnomes or you want to expand and get some ideas or advice, join us over on Facebook. It's DIY Gnomes and Crafts with Other Friends, and Other Crafts with Friends. I'll put a link below. So here I am just tugging on everything after it's dry, making sure I have no holes. I'll also do it on the hat after I turn it right sides out. I'm using the end of my scissors. They're blunt, they're sewing scissors, you know, like fabric scissors. So I'm just going to use those to poke out the tip of the hat. And here again, I'm just going to start pulling and yanking and making sure I don't have any gaps in the glue or anything like that. All right, so for the body, I'm going to do the same thing. I tugged really hard on the bottom only because it's going to hold all of our weight, right? Okay, so for the tip, I did the same exact thing, and then I turned the body right sides out and ran that seam between my fingers to get it flat. Also bang it on the table. All right, so I'm going to show you. So the other gnome I did here, you can see the glue mark. I have the same mark on the other gnome, just in a different place. So if you are really good with a hot glue gun, let me know what I did wrong. So I filled it with my poly pellets as a base, and I'm use is optional, but you can use a wire with the end rolled down, poke it and turn it 90 degrees once you have it in. Once all of our weight and polyfill are in there, it stays in place with a couple of tricks. So I'm going to cut the top off, roll it down, and then tuck it right all the way into the top of the body before I start filling. So for fill, I use polyfill. You can use the inside of any pillow you get at big box stores or the Dollar Tree, whatever you can find. Do make sure you roll it between your hands to make sure that it's just nice and smooth. So in order to close up this little piece, we're just going to make a channel. So you'll be pushing down the two seams so that it doesn't look like the two edges of fleece are squished together. So all we're going to do is add a little glue and then make a little channel and put this wire all the way in, and that way the wire will not move no matter how many times people bend it. So I'm going to use some clips here from the Dollar Tree just to hold this in place while I glue it. I normally sew these up, but again, challenge to make a no-sew gnome out of my sewing pattern. I figure I should keep it hot glue. So you can see I'm just tucking that other edge down and just matching it all up, moving my clip over to where it's glued. Next section, moving the clip, next section, and I do that all the way down and set that aside so that I can make sure it sets completely. So once it's done, I'm just going to roll it, slip the hat on, lining up the very back seams, and then I'm going to actually tug the top and move it down to make sure my hat is all the way up into the tip of the body and the hat is matched up. So I always pin the back to make sure when I do this little scrunch, it doesn't go anywhere. And I pin that scrunch in place because it gives me an idea where I want to put my fur for my beard and my nose. So for faux fur, I have an entire video on how to cut faux fur the right way, but I'm just going to make sure the pile is facing down. I'm going to use an X-Acto knife or a razor blade and then cut the fur backing only, and look how easily this comes off with no transfer. If you're wanting to make the reindeer shoe covers, cut the size indicated 6 by 1.5, and then start at the beginning of the booty only on the bottom edge. You can see, and just all the way around. So when I got one side to the back, I did glue it all the way down and snip it. So instead of overlapping, fleece is one of those that you can actually hide the seam really well. So what I did is like I said, put this side all the way down. And then on this side, I glued all the way up to the seam, and then I'm going to cut it off after that dries, and I'm going to press those two edges together. And you know, no one's going to see this, but I just wanted to show you this technique because I get asked a lot about how to hide hot glue and seams, and you can see it basically just hides itself. For the hooves, it's hooves, right? I traced the outside of the covered booty and then just split these two little things. I ended up cutting them down a little bit because they were a little bit big for my guy, but this was a great thing because all I did is cut inside that white line, and like I said, I end up cutting them down. But to cover the booties, it's exactly like the angel gnome from the Dollar Tree I shared. We're going to tack down the very front, get the two little pleats and glue those together inside and on the outside. Then we're just going to trim off this back edge, which is going to be how we secure it after we glue this top bit of fleece right to the booty. So I'm just going to add these hoof things to the bottom. Yeah. And then you'll see I end up trimming off some of that white pen that I didn't quite get off the first time. And I'm going to repeat that with the second one and set those just off to the side. But you can see they're a little long, but I'd rather be on the long side. So for the arms, if you're making the one with the arms, you're just going to make sure the seam of the arm is in the middle. And then we're going to flip out our little mittens, rubbing that seam between our hands and then tucking the arm all the way down into the mitten. And then I like to position everything just to get an idea of A, what to hold, and B, where the beard goes. So I'm using these little mini ornaments I got from the Walmart at the coast on my mom vacation. And then I took off the bow and hot glued down the little sign. And then I'm just going to secure the beard on at the very top, make sure I like where it is. And then I'm going to secure the beard all the way down through the bottom. I end up doing the sides as well because he's going to hold something. We don't want it to come up. In order to attach the nose, I split the fur to its fabric backing, and then I'm going to add a generous portion of hot glue before giving an intense nose boop right here. I do hold that until it dries. Once it's dried, I just add the little scrunch to my hat by gluing the front of the hat directly to the top of the nose. And I'm going to do that on the second gnome as well. And you may ask yourself, why am I making two gnomes? It's because I forgot to hit record when I made the first one. So bam, you get two different styles. I'm just going to go ahead and secure the entire hat on the one with the feet. But the other one, we need to position our arms and get those solid. And in order to do that, we're just going to glue on these mittens. And then we're going to glue the arm part to the body. So right here. And do the other side. And the arm. And that helps when we go ahead and attach our whatever it is ornament they're holding. I'm just going to glue that, making sure I'm lifting it away from any faux fur so it doesn't get trapped in there. And next step, you guessed it, we're just going to hot glue down that hat all the way around, making sure to remove our pins, which I have left in before. All right. So for the little guy, I just attached a generous portion of hot glue around that top edge, moved the beard out of the way and stuck a pin in there so I wouldn't glue it in. You can see right there, I'm going to do the other side the same exact way. And here they are so far. For the little reindeer bit, I'm just using the velvet ribbon. I sized it, pinned it, and then put the antlers, like just stuck them in, no glue, to make sure I knew where to put my bells. And I just made a little white dot for all of the bells, which I then sewed on with a little embroidery thread and a needle. Just 3 of those. Excuse me, you can do them all the way around. That'd be cute too. But after I tied each of them off, I did secure that with hot glue on the underside. And then I'm just going to attach them with hot glue along the back. So again, glue, remove the pin, and glue the other one on top, trying to match up the back edges there. And then for the little antlers, I just stuck them into the band and hot glued those directly to the hat. I didn't want glue to show on the ribbon side, so I just glued them to the hat, and here they are. And that's it. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. A, would you use the Scandi Sweeties pattern this way? You can get it down below. Also down below, let me know what you'd name them. Here is a Holiday Gnomes playlist for you. Hi friends, it's Sarah from rufflesandrainboots.com, and guess what? Today I am here with a no-sew holiday gnome. I am making this Santa hat cutie, and if you'd like to make him, just boop, stick around. As always, please give this video a like so I know you're here, and because it really helps me with this YouTube algorithm. So I like to show you the front, the back, the sides, everything, and here he is. You have a couple options to make him. I'm going to talk about the cuts in a second, but I'm using a 1-inch wood round for the nose, and I'm going to add a little color with some blush. So I also have a blush brush. I'm using crushed velvet and this gold foam for the belt, and for the beard I'm using a white Mongolian fur, and to cut that I need an X-Acto knife and a cutting mat. For weight, I'm using poly pellets, and for fill, I'm using polyfill. Both of those you can get at the craft store. Even though we're not sewing, I do recommend pins. So I'm going to start with this base piece. So you cut the base body and the base round. I'm just going to follow the instructions in order to get this base piece ready, but I'm not going to add the round yet. I'm going to let that glue solidify. So I'm going to come over here to the hat, and this is regular blizzard fleece, which I can never honestly tell which is the right side or not, so meh. But I'm just going to use my glue gun and do the top and the long edge. If you would like to add a brim, do that before you put right sides together and glue this all up. Speaking of glue, I am getting a lot of questions about the glue gun. It is the Surebonder detail tip, and I will link it below if I can find it. I think I got it on Amazon. So the next bit is we're just going to put the right side of the base piece inside the body, and we're going to glue just the seam area, set it aside, and let it solidify. For the arms, you can absolutely put right sides together. I'm lazy, so I'm just going to glue the wrong sides of the long edge together on both of the arms. So I am using a real-time tutorial, been asked to do a couple more of those, so they're just over 10 minutes long. Let me know if you like this format here. So on the mittens, I will say, after doing like 4 of these now, I would do half of the mittens first with right sides together, set it aside, do the other mitten, and then come back. What I have found is that when the glue is solidified, you don't have any squishy movement, and it really helped to keep that mitten like round and really looking nice when you flipped it out. All right, so we are now going to set those both aside and move back to this body piece. Grab your pins, and for those of you who are new, you're just going to pick it up and let it fall. And where it falls, you're going to join those 2 pieces. Let me get back in frame. It's not like I do this for a living or anything. Okay, so you're just going to pin these 2 right here. Don't shift them or squish them or move them. Fleece is one of those fabrics that will really move pretty easily. So just make sure you leave it where it is and then split the difference between the pin and where you glued. So you have this nice big flat, I mean, it looks kind of like a puppet mouth, but yeah, I'm just gonna pin it right there in the middle. And then I'm going to split the difference between the pin and the glue, and then split the difference between the other 2 pins on the other side. You see? So it should all be flat. There's no scrunching in the base piece. So when you pin it and when you glue it, it will be flat. You can see here, I'm just gonna shift and move until I get it flat, and then I'm gonna pin it. And then again, I'm going to split the difference and pin this. It's easy peasy, right? I'm so impressed with all of you who told me you were hot gluing my sewing pattern, because I would not have thought of this. I'm absolutely not joking with you. In my mind, there's a delineation between gluing and sewing, but no, not anymore. You have convinced me. All right, so now our next step is just to take our little detail gun and glue this together. I also got asked on the last one, am I using fabric hot glue sticks for this? Nope, just regular hot glue. They are the Surebonder glue sticks, so I have found that, ooh, the hot glue does matter. So I'm gonna speed this part up just because it's literally the same thing. But I do love the Surebonder glue sticks, and I love the Gorilla glue sticks. So both of those I buy interchangeably, just on Amazon. It's a local company to me. But I did see Surebonder mini glue sticks just the other day at the Joann's. Okay. So once you have this base glued all the way around, go ahead and set it aside before you start tagging. Speaking of tagging, we're going to move to the hat. So I do recommend you just start yanking on it and making sure that this is solid before moving on. And then grab, you know, a bamboo skewer or a pen or something to help you poke out the very tip of both the hat and the body. All right. I just run it between my fingers to make sure I have that seam. And then sometimes I have to whack it on the table. All right, again, I'm just pulling it, making sure my seam is pretty because this is going to be seen. All right, so then moving over to our little mittens. Oh my goodness, they're so tiny. So for those of you who have the pattern, these are the tie top mittens, so the longer of the 2. And I'm just going to rub those seams in between my fingers just to make sure it's laying flat for both of the mittens. And for the arms, I'm just going to put the seam in the middle, and I'm going to tuck the arm all the way into the tip of the mitten, and then I'm just going to tie those off in a minute. For the body, I do the same thing. I tug on every little seam and make sure it's good before turning everything right sides out. Again, using that bamboo skewer for the tip. And then here comes one of my favorite parts of making gnomes. I thwack it on the table, run that bottom seam through my fingers, and then just thwack. I'm just making sure that that seam along the back is good. Thwack, 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 thwack. I will keep the sound effects to a minimum as well. All right, so now we're going to start with our weight. So I am using the poly pellets, which are non-odor, non-moisture absorbing, and I do recommend you use them. I'm using 1 cup, and I'm going to fill the body with a funnel. Once that's in, I'm going to tamp it down, and then I'm going to fill the body with polyfill. I get asked a lot about how much polyfill to use, and the answer is when you squeeze it and it bounces back, it's full. If it doesn't, it's not. So I'm just going to use these Dollar Tree clips here, and then I'm going to use my glue gun to secure this opening. So I'm just going to glue a little, hold it, or move the clips down, and then glue a little more, hold it, and move the clips down, that kind of stuff. Move, move, glue, glue, move, move. And again, no one is ever going to see this unless you're making an interchangeable hat gnome. So if it looks like Frankenstein's monster, you know, you're fine. All right, so I do make sure this lands every single time straight up, and then I'm going to slip on the hat. Do make sure, because we didn't put a wire in, this part's a little trickier, but do make sure the very 2 tips of the body and the hat are exactly lined up, because that helps with everything else. I do use some pins in the back to make sure the back of the hat doesn't move whilst I do things like this, which is just to scrunch up the hat to give me an idea of where the nose could be. I'm going to put a pin right there, and then it's time for a really fun part after I roll this edge up here along the side. You don't have to do this part yet. I just like to get a look of it. For faux fur, you are going to put it face down on your cutting mat. You're going to make sure the pile is all brushed down the right way, and then you're going to measure however you measure. I'm measuring with my fingers. And then you're going to cut just the fabric backing with your X-Acto knife. I have an entire video on cutting faux fur if you need it. So we're going to find the middle and then do the depth. For Mongolian fur, it's very long, so I don't need a very big beard at all for the entire front to be covered. So now I'm just going to make a U shape, fold it over, and I'm going to speed this part up for you because it's the exact same thing. You're just matching it up. And when you cut faux fur the right way, look, no transfer. Get that out of the way. I did brush mine. I'm going to use that to split the nose, or split the fur for the nose as well. And then I'm just going to put it into position, remove the pin, and tuck it up just where that nose was going to go. And then pull the hat out of the way so I don't get glue on it, because I'm not the best with a hot glue gun. And then I'm going to flip down the top and glue down the fabric backing. I was asked the other day, can I sew this on? You absolutely can. I am not ever going to do that, but you can. You can absolutely sew this on. So once the top is secure, I just go ahead and glue down the entire bottom. Squish, squish, squish. And then I'm going to use my little cat comb or dog brush, whatever this is, to split the fur to its fabric backing, making sort of a mustache. I'm going to add a generous portion of hot glue after I blush my nose. So you don't have to do this part. I just felt that, you know, Santa has like a little pink nose, right? And I was too lazy to make a nose, so I'm just gonna add some blush to a wood round, add a generous portion of hot glue, and then I'm going to give an intense nose boop, boop, and let that dry before moving on. Now it's time for me to do my hat. I'm going to make a teeny tiny little hem, and then I'm going to glue that to the top of the nose. After I flip it all down, make sure it's in place. Just glue that right to the top of the nose before moving on. And now I'm just working on my scrunch because I'm going to, isn't he cute? You can stop there, by the way. You don't have to use arms. No one's making you. This is your gnome. All right, so I'm just going to go grab some embroidery thread, make a little red tie here on my mittens. And then I'm going to tuck those into place and then pin them. And then I'm going to use the worst fabric in the world, which is a 4-way stretch crushed velvet. But I have this left and I'm going to use it. If you have black velvet ribbon, that would be super cool. Or even the little faux leather. good, because it would avoid you having to do both hems on the edges and then flipping it up into itself to make a nice 1 inch or so little belt. I just pinned that in place and got out my very sparkly foam. I use this for all of my buckles because I can never find buckles at the craft store. I cut out a little square in the middle before gluing my little belt down here, lining up everything in the back and then cutting off the excess. The next step is just to make sure all of this is down anywhere it's going to be tugged, and then glue my little buckle right on the front. I just glued my hand in there too, by the way. All right, so our next step is just to first glue the arm to the body and then glue the hat to the arm and, excuse me, and the body all the way around. You know what would be, I just thought of this. If you added a little pom-pom to the top of that, that would be super cute. Oh, now I'm gonna have to do that. Okay, so this is called plush fur. This is optional. You can use chenille yarn, anything you want. With plush fur, go ahead and cut it about 1 inch wide and then glue the fabric backing together. Then glue where the fabric comes together in the back, right on there. You're gonna get a nice solid seam. So I like to do the nose first and then do this all the way around the rest of my gnome. This stuff is amazing. I absolutely love it. However, you're gonna need a lint brush because no matter how I cut this, it's a shedding fabric. So I'm gonna go get my lint brush and get all this stuff off of this guy and off of me. And here he is. Isn't he adorbs? To quote the kids. No, I just really love him, but hey, it's not about me, it's what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Also below, you can get the link for the Scandinavian Sweeties pattern. As always, thank you for being here. Here's a Christmas Gnomes playlist. Hi friends, it's Sarah from rufflesandrainboots.com, and today I'm sharing a no-sew gingerbread man gnome. If you would like to make it with me, just boop, stick around. As always, please give this video a like so I know you're here, and it helps me with this YouTube algorithm. So you can see this gnome, he's a cutie, he is solid. The pattern will be linked down below. We have adjustable arms, boom, look at this, this is such a solid guy. I'm gonna show you how to weight a couple of ways. But you can see he had his arms out. These are with the arm pulled in, so they're adjustable. So we're gonna start out using the Scandinavian Sweeties pattern with 4 mittens, 2 arms, a base, a body, and a hat. I'm going to use a wood round, you can use cardboard. We're gonna need some floral wire and any kind of shoe. I have these from the Dollar Tree, but if you have Hobby Lobby, Dollar Tree booties, anything will work. I'm also going to use a long pile Mongolian fur in white, an X-Acto knife, and a cutting mat for that. For weight, I'm going to use non-odor, non-moisture absorbing poly beads. I do recommend them. And then any kind of polyfill. You can get this out of pillows you buy at Walmart, anything you'd like. I get it from the craft store. For my accents, I'm using a white Rick Rack, and I got this at Joann's. You can get it by the yard or on these little packages. I like these little buttons because they look like gumdrops to me. You know, make your choice, but if you can't find those, you can use any Christmas button, which I thought would be really cute, like presents or candy canes. So for this, I am going to put right sides together and put the arms together. So we are going to be turning these out. I'm using a detailed glue gun. This is the Sure Bonder detail tip. And I'm going to put a thin line of hot glue along that long arm edge and repeat with the second arm. Set those aside so the glue will set. Now speaking of setting the glue, when you do the mittens, these are the tie top version, I'm going to do half of each mitten because if I do that, it's less likely that the fleece will move. Fleece is a very stretchy fabric and it moves until the glue is set. So in order to get around that, we're just going to do half of each of the mittens, put them aside, and then go back to the original one and do the other half. You come out with nice rounded mittens when you use a detailed glue gun. So I'm just going to speed this up. Speaking of speeding this up, let me know down in the comments if this is the kind of tutorial you like where it's at real time with a little repeat stuff sped up. Go ahead and follow the pattern instructions for the body, again using that detailed tip glue gun. Go ahead and do the entire body and set it aside, and then onto the entire hat. Once the body is set, you're going to take the base piece, put the right side facing in, and secure one side. Now that we want to be very secure because we're going to tug on this elsewhere. In order to put the base together, it's just like when I share the sewing tutorials for this pattern, you're going to get the bottom or the opposite side of where you've glued or pinned, and then you're just going to join that up. I do recommend using sewing pins or needles, anything you have on hand, because what you're going to do is make sure it's all flat. There's no puckering at the bottom of this pattern. So if you do get puckering, just undo your pins and try again. So I'm going to show you exactly what I do every time. I'm going to use a little more pins than I would normally use, but I do recommend if you're new to this, go ahead and use quite a few pins. No one's gonna see it. No one's gonna judge you, okay? So just go, I'm gonna speed this part up, but you're basically just splitting the difference between the pins all the way around, okay? And then you get this. And we take our little glue gun here and we just start gluing in between these open areas, and you're just gonna make sure that the two edges are aligned. If any glue seeps out, so you don't need to squish them together, that's actually what we don't wanna do. But if any glue seeps out towards you, don't worry about it because it's going to be hidden. So I'm just going to split the pins or where I've glued, and then once I have a solid base, I'm just going to start taking out those pins and filling in those gaps as well. Yeah, easy peasy. Oh, I say that every video. Sorry. Let me know in the comments if that's an annoying phrase. I think I say it so much. Sorry. All right, so once that's secure, we're gonna set that aside and really let it adhere. And then we're just gonna flip everything right side out. So I start with the mittens and make sure it's nice and rounded. If you have any openings, go ahead and glue those up, but I'm pulling them apart and making sure everything is solid. For the arms, I do recommend using like a bamboo skewer or a pencil to help you push them out. And then we're just gonna rub that seam in between our fingers. Repeat for the other arm. And then to make the actual arm assembly, we're just going to stick the seam in between the middle on one edge and then, or on one side, and then we're just gonna stuff it all the way down into the tie top mitten. That's it. I'm going to do the same here with the hat, pulling before I turn it right sides out. I also check the seam once I turn it right sides out. But for the body, turn the tip out first using the bamboo skewer or an eraser or whatever for the tip, and then flip out the body. I bang it on the table. And now either your cardboard round or your wood round goes all the way into the bottom of that. There's no need to secure it because the weight will keep it in place. But you can see, make sure it falls straight up. I'm going to secure the arms here and then just move on to filling it with 1 cup of poly beads. I like to drop it on the table, make sure they're nice and tamped down before I move to the poly fill. Go ahead and stuff that all the way into the very, very tip of the hat, or of the body, I mean. And then I get asked a lot about how much polyfill to put in there. You want to be able to squeeze it and have it bounce back to its original shape. If it doesn't, you want more polyfill. So I like to rub it in between my hands to distribute everything. Another tip is to pull small sections of polyfill instead of one big clump, and that's a little easier to sort of round it out. I'm using the Dollar Tree floral wire. You can use any wire. 18 gauge is probably the lowest I would go. If yours is thin, you can even double it up. But you're going to turn over one end and you're going to stick that along the back seam all the way down into the bottom, poke it out a little bit and turn it 90 degrees. And that way it'll stay in place down there as we line it up with the back seam here. There we go. And then just lay it on the table and get your, these should not be wire cutter scissors, Sarah. These scissors, and then just snip it off. Use your wire cutters. And then bend down that top piece as well so we can stick it all the way in the tip of the body. Just like so. Now we're going to grab our hot glue gun again and we're going to seal up this body. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to lock this wire in the channel. And so all that means is just add a little hot glue and then pull that wire up and secure the piece all the way around it. And then do it all the way up. And now it's time to close the backing. You can sew it, you can glue it, but I'm gonna glue it because I'm lazy. So what I'm gonna do is grab some, you can use pins or clips for this. I use the Dollar Tree clips because they're always in my craft room. I'm gonna turn over the opposite edge and then I'm just gonna clip these two pieces together. And if you go slow, it looks completely seamless. I really like it when it works because it's so much easier for me to use hot glue and have it look good than sew up. I'm the worst at hand sewing. I really am. All right, once that's done, we're going to slip on the hat, making sure the very tip of the hat is at the very tip of the body and the seam is aligned in the back. I do recommend that you pin the back of the hat so that when you flip it over and scrunch up the nose like this, your hat doesn't move. This is going to be the basis for the entire personality of our gnome. So, I don't know. I think it's a good tip. Go ahead and get that same wire you used before, flip over one end, and now what you're going to do is just measure. So I will tell you without a fraction of a doubt, when you have a piece of wire that goes all the way through, you're going to have less failure than if you try to attach a single arm. So in order to have it all the way through, we're just going to cut a tiny little slit after we identify where our beard and hat will fall. We're going to push it on the other side, see where it comes out, make a tiny little slit in the fleece there as well. And then just poke it all the way through. Boop. Now, as for the arm length, this is going to depend on your mitten, but one little tip is you're going to glue it at its longest point, okay? So that way we can just bend the wire if we want it shorter. I added a little hot glue, stuck on my little mitten my arm very carefully, and make sure that glue goes straight to the edge of the mitten. And then you can see how it just kisses the edge of the body here. So we're going to glue the inside of this arm directly to the body. And just make sure you have it like where the seam is in the facing the back. There you go. And then we're just going to glue that down with our little detail glue gun tip thingy. That's technical. Such a technical term. All right, so then you're going to press that against the body, hold it there until it dries, and then do the other arm. So again, twist it, cut it off if you need to, and then twist it, add a little bit of glue all the way to the end, and then secure down the arm as well on that side. Again, at its longest point. Because it was really cute, I wanted to see if I could get it to hold something, which totally worked, by the way, like a candy cane. Okay, so if you don't know this trick, use a string to measure the width between the two arms where they join to the body. So we're going to cover the arms with the beard. So here I am, I just measured it really quickly. I'm going to cut off the top to make it flat. And then I'm going to measure down. Now this is a long pile first, so I don't need to go all the way down. I'm just going to make a nice big rounded V shape. And then you can see no transfer if you cut just the fabric backing with the X-Acto knife. Fold it in half to match up where the two pieces are aligned. And then here's your beard. Give it a little brushing. I had a knot in mine, probably because I just wad up my faux fur in my craft room. And then I used a pin to secure it in place while I glued it everywhere. Now watch this. This is important because if you don't want to see the join to the arm, and I didn't, make sure it lines up right to the edge of that arm. And then glue down the beard on the sides everywhere and the little bottom part as well. To add the nose, we're gonna split the fur to its fabric backing, add a generous portion of hot glue, and then give an intense nose boop until it's solid. Now I had these little what I thought were like gumdrop looking buttons. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same exact process for these buttons. Could you sew them on? Absolutely you could. I'm not gonna. All right, but I did get a needle and thread in just a second for the shoes. To finish off this hat, we are going to make a faux little hem here, and then we're going to glue that to the top of our nose so that's nice and secure. For the trim, I am going to use this rickrack, and I'm going to glue it in place in the back first so that I can tug it and sort of make the mittens tighter. And while that's setting, I'm going to glue down the rest of the hat. If you don't want to do that, use a small piece of embroidery thread to tighten your mitten and then add your trim. Again, I was too lazy to go get white embroidery thread. I'm a lazy crafter. It's okay. I added a little bit to the top of the hat, and now it's time to make the shoes. And because I had these on hand, I'm gonna make them. I cut a 6" by 1.5" inch piece for each shoe, added a little glue to the very tip of the bottom only, and then I'm going to line up the middle of my cut piece of fleece right there and secure it on one side on the bottom all the way around. I lock that back in place with a little bit of hot glue, and then I move on to the other side. Now I ended up adding like a little detail on my back, which is just folding over about, I don't know, a 1/2 inch or so of the fabric before laying it down flat. Now I do secure the very front and push it straight so it forms these two, like a little heart. And then I cut off at an angle, starting from the heart, going all the way back down to the brim of the shoe, and then all the way back up. So it's like a slope. and then I secure the fleece on the way, all the way around the back. Now for the front, I'm using a needle and thread, starting from the inside, going out, adding my button, starting from the outside, going in and securing that. Because we've already weighted our gnome, this isn't technically necessary, but I get a lot of emails about pool noodle gnomes falling over and all kinds of stuff falling over. So I add weight. And to do that, I just add a little hot glue, little rock, little hot glue, little rock. And then I'm going to trace the bottom of the shoe as it's completed onto dark brown felt, cut that out and add that for a sole. And then I just repeated this with the second shoe. Now to assemble my gnome onto his shoes, I did pin my beard out of the way. What we're gonna do is, this is like, you have to move your gnome forward and backwards like real people would do to make sure you have the right place. So mine, I just marked where I needed to do it. I added a little bit of hot glue, not a little bit of hot glue. I added a lot of hot glue around the top edges of these things, sort of facing inwards, and then held my gnome here. He's a solid guy. Here's his little shoes. Here's his little arms outstretched. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? Also down below, you can get the Scandinavian Sweeties pattern. And hey, thank you for being here. Here's a playlist with more no-sew Christmas gnomes. Hi friends, it's Sarah with Ruffles and Rainboots.com, and I'm here with a most requested no-sew shelf sitter gnome with a free boot pattern and really fun details. If you'd like to make it, just boop, stick around. Now this video is a little bit longer than normal, and that is because I'm going to go step by step. Please like this video so I know you're here crafting with me. Here's the guy we're making. He's got a bendable hat, cute oversized little mittens, these long luscious legs into these adorable boots. All right, so both of the patterns will be down below. I get asked a lot how I cut it. Y'all, it doesn't matter. I use the Cricut machine, I use scissors, and I use a rotary cutter on a mat. All of them work. I'm going to be using a hat, a body, a base, 2 legs cut at 3 by 10 inches long. Now they're cotton, everything else is fleece. I have 2 sets of mittens, 2 arms, and 2 of the slopey boot pattern. All of this will be down below, and this is what I'm using. You can make any changes you want. If you are sewing or you're good with hot glue assembly, skip to 10 minutes and 15 seconds, and it'll be more like normal. Now, my first tip, whether you're sewing or gluing, is always pin your fabric. It doesn't matter. To get the easiest, most clean hot glue seam, put your entire elbow to wrist on a table and use that as a brace. Now, anything cotton, I recommend fusible tape, which you can just iron on, or using fabric hot glue sticks. I am using a regular hot glue stick to tell you it can be done, but if there's going to be a failure, it's going to be where hot glue is used on cotton. Now, most of the time, cotton is like a slicker fabric than something like fleece that has a grip. All right, so we're just going to do both legs with the right sides of the fabric folded together, and the same thing on the arms. All along that long, flat edge, we're just going to follow the pattern. For the body and the hat, again, we're bracing our hand on the table so that we get a nice clean line, and we're just tapping. There's no need to like squish down the hot glue, right? We don't need to press that joint together. We just tap it together. You want that hot glue to go into those fibers for a nice, even mend. Ready? Just tippity tap, 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 tap. There you go. All right, so once you have that, I'm going to move on to things that have curves. I always recommend pinning the fabric. Our goal is to get the edges of the fabric lined up. If you've done your job and cut the pattern, why not make it the best join it can possibly be? So I'm going to anchor anything, always anchor on straight lines so that I can focus on my curve without anything moving. So as you can see, it's still pinned together. I'm going to focus on these 2 sides. And again, I'm going to line up the edges of the fabric. So here I can see the fabric edge on top will be a little bit lower or longer than the other. So I just pick up the center. For the curve, my arm and wrist are on the table, and I'm just going to follow that outside edge. Using a detail tip glue gun makes this a whole lot easier. So I repeated the second one, and now on the little shoes, this is what I do most of the time. Anything with curves, I alternate. Just like I did with the mittens, I would do a straight part and then let it set, or do a curved part and then let it set. So both of these are the same way. When you cut the slopey boot pattern, the very back of the pattern will be cut on the fold. So you only really have to do the little heel part, the base, and then the rounded toe part. Now, in the pattern, it'll actually tell you to go all the way up to the ankle with the glue, and I'm only going to alter that just because I wanted to see what a lace-up little booty would look like with embroidery thread. And you'll see it's more work than I wanted to do. Again, I'm lining up the fabric edges and then just alternating this all the way around. Now, if you do want to do the little cross at the top of the boot, I found the easiest way is to use 2 needles and 1 piece of embroidery thread. If I were doing it over, I would use a cording just a little bit thicker than the embroidery thread. I'm going to speed this last little part up just a little bit. By the way, all of this so far has been done exactly to speed. I'm just moving in through the part where I'm swapping everything. I'm going to speed that part up. So again, this is me showing you, I'm only going to go part way up the boot so that I can add my little cross shoelaces. All right, now that that's done, take out all your pins so you don't poke yourself, and moving on. If you're new here, let me answer this. The base is not too small for the pattern. It's perfectly sized to give you a nice rounded bottom. So you're going to pin one side just to the right of the seam. You're going to squish together that bottom piece and squish together the body piece so that you can get the 2 points, and where they meet is where we pin. See that? You've just basically cut it in half so that you can tug all of, well, not that length, we'll move that. So you can tug all of this stuff into place. Now all I'm doing is moving the fabric in between my fingers until it is flat. Again, I do not recommend doing the base without pinning everything. So all I'm going to do is repeat this entire process on the other side. And now you're just going to cut between those 2 pins in every little area. I like to leave about 1 inch of space in between it. I think that's the easiest way. But if you're new, put in 72 pins. No one's going to judge you for it. And if you're new to sewing and you're doing this pattern when sewing, again, more pins is not going to hurt you. So here's what it looks like. I know, pinhead, hot mess, but I promise you when we start gluing in between here, you're going to get a nice joint. Now do make sure the entire body is away from the edges, because we don't want to glue anything together that shouldn't be glued together. So all we're going to do is glue these little pockets here. We're going to glue those together. Again, my arm up to my wrist is on the table, so I have the easiest way to control my hot glue. Not only the distribution, meaning how hard I'm pushing the trigger, but where I want that glue to be. I'm just going to split each of these. Oops, get that out of there. Y'all don't know where this lint is coming from. All right, so get that off the table. And now just split the difference between all of these things. Take out your pin, glue it together, and move all the way around. So I'm just going to zoom in so you can see. Look, it's nice and easy, nice and slow. Now this part's a little speeded up because I don't want this video to be 35 minutes long, which is how long it took me to make this gnome. When I sew this, it doesn't take me more than about 20 minutes. Again, the longest part for me is hot gluing everything. If you want to learn how to sew this, you can. I've shared it. When you're turning everything out, use something that's not pointy. I'm using the blunt edge of my scissors to push out that seam. And you can see on all of these, there's no tricks, there's no anything. I'm just speeding it up so you don't have to watch me do all of it. But I'm just, again, staying away from the seam, using the blunt edge and helping turn everything around. I'm going to do the second one here. For the little mittens, I'm going to push the end through instead of pulling it. That will make sure you won't bust any seams. Use the, rounded off edge to poke out all the edges and seams. I take the tip of the hat, rounded edge, poke it out. I go a little slower on this part just because I don't want to stick my scissors through. I also take my fingers and roll the seam so I can lay it flat. All right, for the body is the same thing. I always start with the very tip and then use the blunt edge to poke that out. And then tuck the rest of it all the way through. And then I'm going to run that bottom base all the way around my fingers. I must whack it on the table a couple of times. I don't know why I do it, I just do. And then I drop it just to make sure it stands up on its own. That is always my particular. Did you see that? I almost died. Woo! Careful with your scissors, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so when I'm turning out the seam or turning out the legs, I stay away from the seam. The reason I say that is because it is super easy for you to pop a hot glue join with cotton fabric with anything you're using. So there are a lot of people who swear by the hemostat scissors where you can grab the end. There are people who swear by the turners that you use in sewing. I don't. I get whatever stick is closest to me and I just do it like this. I'm just pulling out the center. I mean, this isn't sped up, okay? So you can see I'm just pulling out again with throwing the scissors at my person. But you can see I am just going slowly and just doing it all the way. No seams pop, move on to the next one. Now, for those of you who are joining us back from the beginning, here are all the pieces glued and turned. We have 2 legs, 2 arms, 2 mittens, 2 booties, a body, and a hat. Woohoo! Now it's time to assemble. For weight, I'm using polyfill and poly pellets. So the weight is going to come from the pellets and the stuffing from the fill. I did not have a thicker gauge wire, but I'm going to wrap this very thin Hobby Lobby wire into a nice, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch piece so that will be my structure. I'm using a 1-inch wood round for the nose. You can use whatever you want. I'm going to take 1 cup of poly pellets and a funnel. I'm going to dump those in, which I will edit out to make much faster than it was already. Now they're all in. Okay, look, I didn't spill any. That may be a first. All right, now moving on to the polyfill. I tear it off into small chunks so that I can get it into tricky places, like the very tip of this hat. So I'm just going to chunk each of these pieces, and then I'm going to get something to press it into that very, very tip. Again, blunt edge of the scissors works perfectly fine. So do hemostat. All right, so I'm going to make sure that my piece of wire or pipe cleaner is at least 1 inch longer than the entire height of the body because I need to fold down the bottom. And now I'm going to take the top out and I'm going to start at the bottom. Make sure that 90-degree bend is buried under those poly pellets and then put the tip all the way up into the very point of the hat. Now I need to secure it. So I get asked a lot of people sell gnomes, and I am apparently somebody on the internet who comes up when you search about them. They often say, the wire came undone. It won't bend. It's moving around in there. Y'all, you have to secure whatever support you're putting in there, and I like to do it at the seam. That way, your piece will not move around, okay? So we're going to now stuff the rest of it. I get asked a lot about how much stuffing one should use. I think as much as your heart desires. It's like cheese. But really, it's when you squeeze it and it bounces back. That's when you stop. And the reason I say that is because over time, polyfill will lose structure. It won't be as, puffy. It'll become a little more dense. So overstuffing to the point where you can still close it is where we want to be. Now, speaking of closing it, I'm just going to hold these together. It's a great idea if you clip them together. You can use fabric clips or you can use binder clips, whatever you have. But I just want to show you that if you're patient and you want to wait holding the thing there, you can do it like that. All right, so once that is done, I have a little tiny bit of glue that seeped out. I'm just going to cut that off. And now I'm going to roll this in between my hands, make sure the polyfill and poly pellets are distributed evenly so that we have a nice smooth body. I don't know why I was doing that. Just moving it around, roll it between your hands. Well, that was inappropriate. Don't do that. Bash it on the table, make sure it stands up straight, and then slip on the hat and where you are aligning the seams of the body and the hat in the back. So you can see I'm making sure my wire is straight up so I can get the very tip of the wire from the body into the very tip of the hat. That's the best part about this pattern. You don't have any pieces that you have to glue into the hat. So once that's lined up, go opposite of the seam, scrunch your finger up, and that's where you're going to put a pin for the nose. And that's just a placeholder. Do you have to do it? Absolutely not. But I do it in order to make sure I know where my arms are going to go. Now you can wire your arms, but I'm going to try and find some little baby lanterns I bought a year or two ago because they have a black and white ribbon already on them. So I'm going to start the arms by taking the mitten and adding in a bit of polyfill right to the very, very ends. And the reason is because people always tend to squeeze that part. I make it so that the seam is inside, so it's facing inside, and then I just glue that on. And you can scrunch it up, you can add little ties, whatever your heart desires. I end up adding little ties at the end. I'm just going to pop this under the hat about halfway between the front and back of the body and just straight down because I don't need him holding anything yet. And you can pin those. I always end up pinning them. So you're just going to repeat those same steps with the other arm and pop that on as well as a placeholder. Hello. For the little booties, you can add weight. I don't think I need to with most of my shelf sitters. So for this, I'm just going to add polyfill, again, ripped into smaller pieces so it gets into the nice nooks and crannies of the little booty. And now I'm going to be setting that aside because, again, I'm not ready yet to do the crosshatch. For the legs, this is probably the most frustrating one for me when I'm working with cotton because it has no stretch. So all you're going to do is make sure you're nowhere working against near the seam, right? That's where our failure would happen. But everywhere else, just hold it in the cylinder, take the little tiny rip pieces, press them in, and then use something to poke them a little further down, like scissors. Now I do halfway and then I go the other side so I don't have to push it all in. All right, so working on the other side. Again, I don't want to work near the seam, so I'm pressing in on the non-seam part. Again, not sped up. And I apologize for those of you who like quick videos, but this has been requested because people have wanted to know if they can make this gnome without sewing, and absolutely you can. So same principle applies. Once you get the polyfill in there, you're just going to roll it, distribute it. Now you want to make sure you have at least 1.5 inches at the top. So I'm going to pin that off to make sure I don't stuff that and the polyfill doesn't go beyond that. Okay, now for the bottom here, I'm just going to finish this out. This is the part that's going to go into our little booty. All right, so again, same thing, just rolling it. So I'm going to put the seam in the back, and if you were ready to close it up with hot glue, you can do that right here. However, I recommend doing one thing first, and that is because you want to future-proof your item. So here's the part where I took 2 needles and a piece of embroidery thread. I threaded a needle on each end so that I could work faster. All I'm doing is starting in from the back side, and I'm just going to crisscross these. So what I did is I crisscross, and then on the same side, I come out and crisscross again. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if that makes sense, but basically this is me crisscrossing it. Okay, and then I'm going to go, oopsie, there you go. There's the crisscross. And then here's the other crisscross. Okay. And now I'm going to stay on the same side and go from the inside out before I crisscross again. See that? So I'm coming in from the inside out on the same side and then crisscrossing it. That's the easiest way I found to do this. So I'm just going to repeat this until I get as high as I want. I didn't want all the way up. And in between the crisscrosses, I added hot glue just to make sure no polyfill would ever come out. All right, so here's me doing the rest of my crisscrosses. And then I'm going to glue that little part in the middle there as well. Okay, so I tied it into a little knot, a double knot, and then I'm just going to tuck those ends into the center. Now, here's the part where you're future-proofing your polyfill. I'm going to glue down the end tabs. They don't have to look pretty of the leg, and that way no polyfill will escape or transfer, right, from the leg or the booty. All right, so I'm just going to line up this back seam here so no one sees it. And then I'm going to glue this down. And you can add a trim here if you don't like the way it looks all glued right here. But I try to be transparent with you. I'm not adding trims because it all didn't line up or something. This is me making this. It's sitting in my living room right now. If you're following on Facebook, see, look, I just spent 30 minutes looking for those. Do you see that? I found them. I was so excruciatingly happy. I can't even explain. All right, so now I'm going to cut off the excess. I made this 10 by 3, very, very long in case you wanted long. I needed it just to be to the bottom of my mantle, so I'm cutting them off and just using the first piece to cut the second. Now, I'm going to pop in some pins, whoop, there you go, for these arms so that they stay in place and out of the way. And for those of you who are new here, if you've never seen this done, I'm going to flip this over on the bottom so you can see what it looks like. You are simply going to glue the little legs to the bum bum. That's it. If you are sewing, this process is way easier. You've already done it when you created the body. But for those of you who are not sewing, don't worry. You're just going to glue them down. They're going to overlap, and that's okay. So glue them down, and then when you remove the pins, you'll be able to glue the front because you want those pieces to stay in place. Now, if you don't want the bottom to look like that, you go back to your pattern and you cut a second base. So stinking easy. Here you go. I've answered this question so many times in email, so now I'm going to show you. You're just going to glue it directly onto the bottom in the same color of body, whatever you've made. Now, I chose to move mine back a little bit. You can see here, I'm just going to add my glue. It doesn't have to be pretty. Obviously, that's not pretty. But do make sure the glue covers all of the base. So decide on whatever faux fur beard you want, or moss, or yarn, Dollar Tree mop, whatever you'd like. Measure it with your fingers. You can see my horizontal measurement here and my vertical measurement. I'm going to fold it in half. This is how I find the center. I just make a mark and realize, ooh, I was off by 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to make a dropped V shape. Make sure the pile is pointing down and use an X-Acto knife, razor, or box cutter to just cut the fabric backing. I'm going to speed this part up. But when you rip it apart, watch, boom, beautiful beard. And now you can brush it out if you want. I have these knots in mine because I store it in a big tote. Oh, I have to go pick up my grocery order. So that was an interruption. So I'm going to brush the beard down just so it's nice and pretty, and then I'm going to glue it between the arms. Now, I made mine a little bit longer than the arms, and by a little, I mean like 1/4 of an inch, and that way I can have the arms in front of the beard, and it's nice and joined to the body. So you can see I'm just going to end up gluing that right up under that arm. Now for the nose, I'm going to brush up a little bit of the fur at the top of the beard, and I'm going to split the center of the beard so that I can get to the fabric backing. You'll start to see a line. See that line? That's what we want. A little bit of hot glue, a lot of hot glue, 1-inch round ball, and now brush that fur down over the top of the beard. It's nice and cute. Look, I'm so excited that I found these. I bought these at Walmart forever ago in their mini Christmas tree section, and with the stripies, it's just going to be perfect. So I had to position my arms in order to hold that. So then when I had them positioned, now I'm going to glue them down. I glue the arm fabric to the body first. That's going to be my primary join. I'm going to do that on both sides. You can see only the arms are being glued down and not on the faux fur. Then I'm going to glue the hat fabric over the top of the arm on both sides as well. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. All right. Last little bit here is to make a faux brim for the hat just in front, and then glue that right directly to the top of the nose. Get a nice good join right there. You can add a little hot glue for whatever they're holding in between the two mittens. And then add any decorations you want to for the hat. Mine is a pretty simple guy this year. And here he is, all decked out on my little holiday mantle. And I would love to know what you think. Let me know down in the comments section below. Also down below are the links to the patterns I used. As always, thank you for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe for more crafty fun. Hi friends, it's Sarah from rufflesandrainboots.com, and today we're making one of my favorites, the Scandinavian Sweetie Holiday Gnome. Look at all these fun details. If you'd like to make him, just boop, stick around. As always, please give this video a like so I know you're here crafting with me, and it helps my channel in the algorithm a great deal. So this guy is a perfect tier tray guy. He's bigger than a normal tier tray gnome. He can stand on his own on a shelf sitter in a bookcase or anything like that, but he's still small enough to ship. We're going to need 4 mittens, 4 shoes, 2 sets of arms, a body, a base, and a hat. So do follow the pattern instructions, pinning everything right sides together. If you're new and are worried about skinnier seam allowances like we use on the shoes and the mittens, I'll talk about a way you can do this uncut. So once you have everything pinned, you're going to take it to your sewing machine and use a normal 1/4 inch seam allowance. For the mittens and shoes, those are a smaller seam allowance, but you can always just put 2 pieces of fabric together, pin them in place, draw on the pattern, and sew along that uncut so that it's a little easier for you to use. Be sure to follow the pattern instructions. There is no point in either the body or the hat. It's done for a reason. So after you sew everything together, take the body and the base piece. Those are not going to be sewn on yet because we're going to add our shoes. In order to add our shoes, you're going to put the seam in the middle of our body, and then you're going to pin that out of the way so you can work on one side. Next up, just turn your shoes right sides out, being sure to get those seams as flat as you can by running them in between your fingers, and then stuff each so that they are the same size. I didn't do it, I had to alter mine. And then you're going to take the end side, so the part that's sewn, and you're going to stick it into the body, pointing them a little bit together. And the reason we're doing that is so they sort of flop out a little bit when we turn everything right side out. So what we're gonna do now is take it to the sewing machine and just top stitch right along that edge. You're only going to be sewing the feet. See this? We've started and reversed our stitches, so those are secure. Once you have that, now it's time for the base. You're going to first pin it along the seam, flop it to the opposite side, pin it there, and then you'll go all the way around. So I like to do north, south, east, and west. And I also like to turn out this edge here, lining everything up, so it kind of looks like a mushroom when you're pinning it. If you're new to sewing, do pin it a lot. Use 8 pins or so. If you're also new to sewing, don't worry. You need to just mark it where you've sewn on the shoes. If you do that, everything's gonna line up perfectly. One tip I'm going to give you is when you start and reverse your stitches at the wherever you started your sewing, also start and reverse your stitches at the feet, because if any place is going to fail in your sewing, it'll be there. So I like to reinforce it. Cut off all your extra bits there, all your threads, and then turn it right side out using a dowel or something to, I don't know why I'm making it dance, to get the tips. When you turn out the arms, just be sure to get them fully and put the seam in the middle back. Next up are the little mittens. You don't need anything, just run that seam between your fingers, and then do the hat using a skewer or scissors or whatever to poke out the top. Next up, again, making sure that, hold on, let me show, making sure that this seam is in the middle. You're going to slip this all the way into the mitten, all the way down. We're going to stuff the entire thing, so you don't have to worry about stuffing the mitten all by itself. So you can see I'm just pushing it all the way down. And then grab your hot glue gun, or you can hand stitch this on. I chose hot glue, but you're gonna hot glue both sides on. Next up, we're going to measure out 1 cup. Don't go less than this. You're going to use this 1 cup of poly beads to add the weight, and use a funnel to get it all in there. Do tamp it down on your desk or table so that we can make sure that everything gets settled in that. Look, his little feet, and then, dancing again. So for a bendable posable hat and body, I'm using the Dollar Tree floral wire. It's the thicker one, and I'm just going to roll over the edge so you can see like that, turn it perpendicular, and then make it in, or put it into the gnome, and then make it as tall as the top of the gnome plus another 1/2 inch or so that we can turn that down as well. If you don't turn it down, you run the risk of, or your customer runs the risk of poking that right through the top of the gnome. So you can see I'm just measuring it here. I'm going to use my wire cutters to cut it off just above the edge. Sorry, I'm out of frame. I have no idea why, but I will show you. So you just bend it down and then just roll it over a dowel, or you don't even need a dowel, and then I just stuck this right all the way into the tip of the body and straighten it out a little bit before stuffing the entire gnome. So in order to stuff the gnome, I'm going to be using polyfill, which I get from the craft store or on Amazon, but you can use the inside of pillows you get from Walmart or other big box stores. You can also use the fabric scraps that you made when you cut all these pieces. And I get asked a lot about how much stuffing to use. Always make sure that when you squeeze it, it bounces back to its original size, and that's when you know you're done. All right, so because we use the wire here, I'm going to sew mine up, but you can also hot glue. You're just going to make sure that you're catching the wire in one of the channels. So you can glue the wire inside one of the folds and then glue the two folds together, or you can sew it up like I did here. Always run it between your hands to distribute that polyfill. Drop it on the table and make sure that your gnome is stable before moving on. I'm going to be using a Sherpa fleece for the trim, so I cut 1 inch width on that, and then I'm going to be using a Mongolian fur in frosted gray because I'm obsessed with it. Let's just be real. If you need to learn how to cut faux fur, I have a video. I'll put that in the iCard above. In order to make the trim look round and not flat, you glue the backing together, which is why we cut it so wide at 1 inch. So then I'm just going to take it, starting at the back, I'm going to just add this trim all the way around where the mitten meets the arm. There you go. But again, you can do decorative sewing or use ribbon or whatever. So here I am playing with some gnome nose sizes. I opted to go a little big for this guy, and I'm going to pin everything. So when you're doing a sewing pattern for the very first time, get a lot of pins, have them around, pin everything in place so you can make sure you like where it is. I'm going to add the trim to the hat as well. I start in the front and just make sure the glued portion goes right along this bottom edge here and then all the way around. Once I have that done, I'm going to slip on my hat, and I'm actually going to pin it to make sure that I like where everything is before I start affixing everything to the body of the gnome. The first thing I start with is the focal point, and that's the beard, so I'm just going to glue down the top first, and then pay attention to where this point comes, making sure it comes right between the feet. Next up, I'm going to glue the arms to the body because it's a lot easier to adjust a hat than it is to adjust the arms once they're on the body. All right, I'm going to split the fur to its fabric backing. I'm going to add a generous portion of hot glue, and I'm going to press this nose into that glue, letting it sit. Before moving on, I'm going to brush the fur out of the way just so I don't get it caught, and then I'm going to add a little bit of hot glue. See, I got a little further, so I'm gonna push it back, and I'm going to make sure the front of that stays in place. I then glued down the sides of the hat to the top of the arms to hide everything there, and then I pulled down the back of the hat to make sure we open up the front of the gnome. And look, I sewed on a little like Target dollar spot wreath, made sure he was good for my drop test, and he's done. I love this guy. He has actually been in my craft room all year long. I couldn't put him away from last year when I made him. But let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Also let me know, what should we name this cutie? Thank you so much for being here, and why not watch this Christmas gnome playlist? Hi friends, it's Sarah from Ruffles and Rainboots.com, and today I'm making an angel gnome, and I'm providing 2 free wing templates. If you would like to make this cutie with me, just stick around. As always, please like this video so I know you're here crafting with me. In the background, you're going to hear fall noises, dogs barking, my husband raking leaves. So I use the Scandinavian Sweeties pattern, but you can use any gnome pattern. Down below, you can get 1 or 2 free wing templates. There's this side style and then the one that points down as well. Also down below, go ahead and sign up for the Ruffles and Rain Boots newsletter. I share coupons and freebies, even exclusives I don't share anywhere else. So per the pattern, however you're making it, we're going to assemble all of our pieces for sewing. So for those of you who are new to sewing, you can either cut out the mittens like this, or you can do the sandwich method, which is like this. So all you're going to do is take your mitten material, this is a cream fleece, put it right sides together and pin it in place so it doesn't move. You're going to cut out the pattern. I'm using the tie top from the pattern, and then you're going to trace the outside edge, that's your cut line. You're then going to cut the pattern and trace the inside line, that's your stitch line. All right, so per the pattern, just go ahead and sew up that body and hat. I also did the arms. But you see here where the seam is, you're going to start there when you're attaching the base. Put the base right side facing in so that when we turn it out, it all matches. And then go ahead and just pin that in place right at the very top, which I call the top is the seam to me. So then pick up the entire piece off of the table and you'll see that 2 pieces will fall down to a point. So you just want to identify where that point is and then join those 2 pieces up. And then that's your second pin. After you get that pinned in place, you can squish the sideways view. So hang on, you can see it here. So now you can do this all the way around. You're basically just splitting the difference between all of the pins. It will sit flat. Let me show you. See that gaping hole up at the top left? That's where I'm starting, but everywhere around there is pinned, okay? So we're going to take this and start and reverse our stitches to start. But I wanted to show you, the entire time I am sewing this, I am moving the body piece out of the way as I go around the circle, right? And that way it keeps it all flat, in place, nothing's moving around, bunching up. When you remove it, you just pull everything apart, make sure your stitches are everywhere. All right. These, for the new people, if you want, so that I made it a dotted line so you could see, but you're going to line up your needle, not your presser foot, on that line and sew. So be sure to pick up your presser foot, leaving your needle in place around all these curves. That is the easiest way I can tell you that you are going to get something without any bunching or like hard pokey edges. Once you reverse your stitches, you're going to remove this from your sewing machine and cut all the way around the outside line and just above where you started your stitches. You're going to cut off all of your little strings and then you're just going to flip it right side out. I like to use a pen or dowel to help me, and then roll that seam in between your fingers so that it sits flat. And then look, now you have a little tie top mitten. So for those of you using the other mittens in the Scandinavian Sweeties pattern, it's the exact same. You can do both of these methods. Speaking of both of the methods, this is how I do it, which is just taking it and using a narrow in seam to sew up my mitten. And then here it is turned out, rub the seam in between my fingers again, and then now I have 2 mittens. So I can make them clap. All right, so if you haven't already, go ahead and finish sewing up all the pieces to the pattern like this arm. Once you have everything sewn, go ahead and snip off all your pieces and turn all of them all right sides out using a pencil or dowel to help you poke the tips out of both the hat and the body. Speaking of the body, you're going to rub that base in between your fingers to help that seam sit flat, which will help you later. Go ahead and turn the arms right side out and put the seam down the center of one side. Doesn't matter. That's just going to be whatever side we put near the body. And then you're going to put the arm all the way down into this mitten. And that way we don't have to stuff either of the arm or the mitten because they're so tiny. You can add a wire if you want, but it's not necessary. So now all the pieces you should have are the completed body, the hat, and 2 arms, okay? Those are just the wing templates over there. So choose your wing template and then trace it onto a thin cardboard or a very heavy card stock and then cut those out. All right, so I'm going to use my do the body first. I'm using 1.5 cups of poly pellets, and then I'm going to tamp it on the table to make sure they're all settled. Get some wire, some floral wire, and I'm going to bend down one edge, poke it all the way down along the back seam, and then I'm going to poke out the bottom a little bit so I can grab it and turn it 90 degrees. Just like that. And then I'm going to cut it just above the hat for the height, and then roll down that top and place it all the way into the tip of the body so that we have a bendable quote hat and body. All right, then next step is just to stuff it full of polyfill. I get asked a lot about how thick or how much to polyfill. If you can squeeze it and the item bounces back to its original shape, that's enough. Once you have that, roll the entire item between your hands to sort of help distribute that polyfill. If you use the wire, be sure to catch it. We are going to either sew or glue up this backing, and you can glue the wire into one of the channels and then glue the entire backing closed, or you can do like me and just hand stitch it. Slip on the hat, making sure the two points are really well aligned, and then pin down the back. So we're going to be moving everything. We want the back to stay stationary. Go ahead and lay it down and then scrunch up the front so that we know where to put our nose, and that's a personal preference. See? All right, so now I'm going to take my template over to my minky fur fabric. This is minky plush fur, lots of different names for it. But you're just going to trace that directly onto the fabric and use an X-Acto knife or razor blade to cut the fabric backing only. All right, and then we're just going to repeat that a second time, flip over our cardboard template and trace it and cut that out. Well, once you have that, you're going to lay your plush fur down first, then add a little bit of hot glue, and then add just the tip or edge, because this stuff tends to curl up on itself. And when it does that, if you don't like tug it, even though you've only glued one little piece, but if you don't tug it, it's gonna bunch up and you're not gonna have an entire edge covered. Ask me how I know. I make the mistakes so you don't have to, right? But we're just going to finish that entire edge, and then you're going to line up the fabric after putting hot glue on that cardboard. Do not line up the fur. All right, now we can just go ahead and take off any of that transfer or cut off anything like that where I got hot glue on it. So before I put down my arms, I like to make sure I know what they're gonna be holding. So I just made a little gold plastic bell and a little sprig of berry and leaves. To make the arms, we're just going to put the mittens all the way in and then hot glue the mitten to the arm and tie it off. Again, I'm using the tie top mittens, so I do a couple layers of this red embroidery thread, add a little bit of hot glue, and then knot it before cutting off. And then I'll just redo that for the second arm and pin those back in place until we're ready to glue them down. So for the beard material, I am using a husky. I picked this up on Amazon, and you can see my very fancy beard measuring skills. Yep, that's my finger. So just make sure, the only tip I have here is number 1, find the center before you cut your fabric into a V or a U. And then number 2, only cut the fabric backing. You will have no transfer. I'll put a link to an iCard above about how to cut faux fur if you need that. So I'm just going to add some hot glue to the back, lift up my brim of my hat, and then glue that down. I used my scissors to split the fur to its fabric backing. I added a generous portion of hot glue to that fabric, and then I just chose a 3/4 inch wood round. There are no holes. And then I gave it an intense nose boop. Once that is dry, I'm going to faux hem the hat, so I'm just going to add a little tiny bit of hot glue, fold over the hem, and then I'm going to add glue to the nose and press my hat right down in front so I can get a nice good scrunch that stays there forever. So now's the time for me to put on my item. I'm going to just push the fur out of the way so don't get any glue in it. And then I'm going to have my little guy hold the item, and then I'm going to glue it down. And I know the arms aren't glued down yet, but I like to do it this way just so I can make sure everything's in place. Then I'm going to glue the body to the arm and then the hat to the arm. All right, now I can do the back, so I'm going to flip up this edge and then just glue this all the way down. All right, so now for the wings. You are going to take a pair of scissors, not those wire cutting scissors, but here you go, some sharp scissors, and you're going to cut a channel. This is going to be very close to the fabric backing. You don't want to cut the fabric backing, but we need it to glue to the fabric, not the fur. So you're going to add a very, 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 very generous portion of hot glue, and then you're going to lift the wings up and place them in place when your gnome is standing. Then you can lay down the gnome and let it set before moving on. So I have a new manicure. It's a new day because nothing in my craft room was gold except for that bell. So I had to go and I got these Dollar Tree lights, which happen to be the same exact garland as this Hobby Lobby pack. Just saying. I got gold wire, gold sprigs, and this very thin gold ribbon that I used for the halo. I just made a little circle, tied a teeny tiny bow, and glued it on. And guess what? That's it. What do you think of this? Let me know in the comments below if you would make this. I love him. You can get both the patterns and sign up for the newsletter below. As always, thank you for being here and stay tuned for a Dollar Tree angel coming soon. Hi friends, it's Sarah with Ruffles and Rain Boots, and today I'm going to make a holiday gnome with doll hair and a surprise. If you'd like to make it, just boop, stick around. As always, please like this video so I know you are here crafting along with me. All right, so this doll hair, I have a huge set of doll hair and I had packed it away before the move to Texas, so I'm just gonna start using it on items now going forward. The other portion about this particular pattern is we're gonna make sort of a really cool double layer hat. I'm using the Scandinavian Sweeties pattern and I'm gonna make a base around 2 hats, and I'm going to sew this because I was asked for more sewing tutorials, but you absolutely can glue this. So you're going to follow the pattern. This is a premium pattern. You can get it below, and you're just going to create your base. I have shared how to glue and how to sew on this base, but you anchor, you split, and then you line up all the splits all the way around. So while I'm going to demonstrate this, I do want to say this is my best-selling pattern, and the reason is because it is absolutely versatile. If you create holiday crafts for bazaars or gifts or craft fairs, this is the best-selling one because it's a perfect size gnome. The pattern comes with the entire body, again, sew or glue. It comes with arms, feet, mittens, multiple mittens. It even has an entire Easter set. I've shared how to make Santas, reindeers, so many different styles with this, including my very popular shelf sitter with the very long legs and the free slopey boot pattern. So now we're to the part where you're either going to glue or sew up this base, making sure that you catch all of these fibers all the way around. Try not to sew over your pins, but do, stick to about a 1/4 inch seam allowance and you should be fine all the way around. I get asked a lot about creating patterns. I do create a lot of patterns. It's just that I also have testers. I haven't released a pattern in a while because it is a long process. I moved from Texas or Washington to Texas this year. We're still setting our house up. So that's why I haven't been releasing anything new. So the patterns I'll be sharing this holiday season are going to be some of the free patterns and the premium patterns like the Scandinavian Sweeties and the Chunky Gnome. A lot of you are requesting that one. Now, if you want to make a wow-worthy gnome, that Chunky Gnome is heirloom quality. It can only be sewn because it's so big. All right, so once you have this base on, you left your space. I'm just checking all the way around this, right? Because we want to make sure this is where our weight is going and everything is starting from this point. So I'm not going to cut those off. I'm just going to turn it right side out. I will use the blunt side of my scissors to poke out this little hole or tip. There you go, making sure it's all the way up because we're going to fit these two pieces together so they're seamless. I like to roll my fingers around the bottom of the seam because that way the entire thing sits flat and is ready for fill. Boop. I just like dropping in on things. Boop. Anyway, all right, so now for the hat. I cut one cotton piece and one fleece piece that matched my body, and I'm just going to pin those right sides together. So I am going to leave a significant portion open over here along the side to turn it. I left mine a little bit too big, but you can leave between, 1.5 to 2.5 inches and be absolutely fine. Again, I'm going to stick with a 1/4 seam allowance. So whether you're gluing or whether you're sewing, just make sure you try and hit that. All right, so once I have this and I'm reversing my stitches to lock these in place, I'm just going to remove all the pins and turn it right side out. Did I speed this part up? I have so many videos to edit, you all. It's insane. If you love to edit videos, leave me a comment down below. All right, so I'm just using, again, the blunt edge of my scissors to poke out all 3 corners of this hat. Now you can see that this opening will close. All you have to do is just sort of finger press it together and it'll close. You can top stitch the whole thing if you want. I'm lazy and I didn't do that. So I would recommend more pins than less, but you see what I'm doing here? I'm putting it so this stripe pattern is actually showing through that back seam. Now I'm going to stop it about 1.5 inches above the base of this hat. And the reason is because I want it to flay out on the sides. But I also want that all that stripey is going to show in between. And again, that's my choice. You don't have to do that. But I just sort of made sure that I tried to have that little, I thought it was kind of cute, little peekaboo hat showing in the back. And you can see I can still flay those edges and I have this nice little stripe going up the top. All right, I kind of messed that one part right up there. I let it slip. Again, more pins is always better than fewer pins, in my opinion. All right, so I'm going to flip up my hat. You obviously don't have to do that. Here's where it goes really, really quick. We're going to use about a cup of poly pellets. These are non-odor, non-moisture absorbing weight used for stuffed animals. I'm just going to use a funnel and dump those in. There you go. Tappity tap on the table, and now it's time for polyfill. Now for this one, you are going to put a wire in it if you want a bendable hat. I just recommend the wire because it helps put the 2 pieces together seamlessly. So I'm going to rip apart that polyfill because I am going to be stuffing a wire in it. I want the smaller pieces. Speaking of the wire, we're just going to use a pliable wire. I'm going to curve down both the top and the bottom. So it's cut about 1 inch larger from the bottom to top of the gnome. So add 1 inch to whatever height you have, bend down the bottom, put the top little loop right up in the very top, and then be sure whether you're gluing or sewing this, catch the wire in the channel. Now the reason I'm doing this is because when you just put the wire inside of the gnome body, it will eventually start to move around. And that's kind of frustrating, especially if you sell your gnomes. You don't want that happening. So I'm going to sew up this channel. It looks like a Franken gnome at this point. Look at that. I was not paying attention. I'm reading a really good book, Audible book. Okay, so in order to hide this without having any strings, I'm just going to pop it through the body, pull it tight, and then snip it off, and it's going to disappear right inside. If you're making a seamless back and you know how to hand sew, yeah, that'd be really good too. All right, so you can see I'm just bending the top, making sure that, I can do the shape that I want. And now I'm going to set this aside after I slip on the hat. So I'm going to end up covering the back seam. So I end up turning this hat around, but I'm just lining up the 2 pieces of the hat and the body. The reason I'm doing that is because I want it to go all the way up into the hat as far as possible. All right, so again, I'm going to turn this hat around so I cover that back seam with this. This is doll hair. I'll put the link below. I just got it on Amazon, and it comes in these wefts, right? So it's this long sewn piece of very slinky, very beautiful doll hair. Looks great as braids as well as beards. But we're going to have to layer it because if you tried to put the single layer on, you would see nothing but the fleece showing through. So I'm cutting mine in half. So if I want to make a little matching girl gnome for this guy, I can. So using half of a single weft, I'm going to layer it. Now I glued all this without recording, but basically I'm going to show you. See, it's just layered on top of each other, just like this. See? So I'm just taking my detailed tip Surebonder glue gun, get this. I love it. And then I'm just going to layer this part over top, press it down, and we're good. Now, if you tried to glue this, I guarantee you it would come off. And if you sell, please don't do that. So what I did is I tied a knot in the same color embroidery thread, added it through the body, and then made a series of loops all along that glued weft. So I'm going under the weft top into the gnome, under the weft top into the gnome. So I do that all the way across. Now, again, I do a lot that I give to charity. I do a lot that I give as gifts. So I want to make sure this is as solid as it can be. Again, you do you. Try and glue it on, move it around, bend the body in the hat, see if it works. All right, so I just knotted it off, do the same thing where I hide the thread, boop, just disappears. That's probably my favorite part of having to sew up a body. All right, so you can see mine is a little long and it's splitting down at the bottom, but this is basically the look that I want. I want this hat with a turned up look, and the back, right now, nothing is glued on. I'm going to adjust the beard after I pin the hat down, right? Because I haven't put a nose on yet, haven't done anything. All right, so I'm going to make sure it's all brushed out. I'm going to put it on something tall, and then I'm just going to cut it in an angle up one side, and then cut it in an angle down the other side that matches. So this stuff, when I say it's slimy, that's a bad word. It's slinky. It moves around a lot. It's very fine, right? So if you have fine hair that doesn't take a curl, that's kind of like this stuff right here. But you can see it moving as I go, as I cut it. So it's a little bit frustrating. You can also do it on a flat surface like we do with macrame, but I found that it shifted a lot. So this is the better one. So it took me a couple of rounds to do this because I wanted to make sure that doll hair was to the edge and wouldn't split. All right, so just trimity, trim, 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 and then just, take all those shavings away, clean up your space, get those off of there. All right, so now I can unglue the hat, making sure it's pulled all the way down. I'm actually going to glue the nose directly to the hat because I want the focus of the eye drawn up to that striped pattern, and then I'm going to glue the brim of the hat back so that the weight of the nose doesn't pull it down. Easy peasy, right? I'm going to go up through the flaps in the center back of the hat, glue that directly to the body. Again, you can sew this in place as well. I was very indecisive for a little while on all of my Christmas adages, but I ended up using a frosted fern and these Hobby Lobby vase filler berries, maybe. I love them. I have to find out more crafts to do with them. All right, so I'm just going to cut off the bottom pieces of these so I can get a tiny little bit that's flat and tuck it into the brim. And then I'm going to glue it down. So I want it like kissing the top of the nose and coming down the side. Again, I really want to highlight this large nose. All right. Speaking of the nose, it's just a wooden bead, but you can use a felt ball, pom-pom, fabric stuff with polyfill, whatever your heart desires. I glued on one and then two and then three little beads. Gave him a little, hey, how you doing? There you go. And he's done. As I said, I may make a little girl with braids to match him, but I really like working with the doll hair. I haven't tried curling it yet. Let me know if you have. Let me know down in the comments, what do you think of this? Will you make it? As always, I sincerely appreciate you being here with me. Please like, share, and subscribe for more crafty fun. So, tell me, which of these is your favorite? What did you think? Isn't this a great pattern? Speaking of the pattern, you can get the Scandinavian Sweeties pattern down below. As always, I am so grateful you're here with me and letting me share these with you. Please like this video, share this video, and subscribe for more crafty fun from Ruffles and Rain Boots.